Naomi Lewis thought catering a Charleston wedding would be just another paycheck, until her 2-year-old twins ran down the aisle screaming "Daddy" at the groom, in front of 300 stunned guests, cameras flashing, and a bride frozen in white lace. The architect who'd once promised her forever stood paralyzed as his perfectly constructed life shattered in seconds. But this wasn't revenge. This was an accident that would expose a mother's cruel lies, a stolen letter, and 3 years of secrets that kept a father from his sons. What Naomi didn't know was that the woman in the wedding dress would become her unexpected ally, that forgiveness would prove harder than fury, and that the road from public humiliation to redemption would force everyone to choose between protecting their image and fighting for the truth. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me in the comments if you believe in second chances, because this family is about to prove that love, when it's real, can survive even the most devastating betrayal. The morning light hit Charleston like honey poured slow over cobblestone. Golden and thick, it spilled through the oak trees at the Caldwell estate and settled warm across the manicured lawns. Staff moved in quick, practiced steps, adjusting flower arrangements, polishing silverware, checking the strings of white lights that would glow when evening came. Everything had to be perfect. Today, Ethan Caldwell was getting married. Inside the catering kitchen at the back of the estate, Naomi Lewis wiped flour from her hands and checked the oven timer. 3 more minutes. She glanced at the towering wedding cake on the counter, 4 tiers of vanilla buttercream with delicate sugar flowers she'd spent 2 days crafting. It was beautiful, professional, the kind of work that made her proud. "Girl, you sure you're okay doing this?" Harper Bennett leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Harper was Naomi's best friend and business partner, 33, bold, and never afraid to speak her mind. "I mean, a Caldwell wedding? That's a lot of pressure." Naomi smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's just another job, Harper. A big one, yeah, but we need it. The bakery's bills don't pay themselves." Harper studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, but if anything feels wrong, we leave. Deal?" "Deal." The timer beeped. Naomi pulled out the final batch of mini lemon tarts and set them on the cooling rack. Behind her, she heard the soft padding of small feet. She turned to see her twin boys, Micah and Miles, peeking around the corner. They were 2.5, still small enough to fit in her arms at the same time, though they were getting heavier every day. "Mama, can we have a cookie?" Micah asked, his brown eyes wide and hopeful. "Not yet, baby. These are for the party." Naomi crouched down and brushed a hand over his tight curls. "But if you both sit nice and quiet, I'll get you some juice. Okay?" Miles nodded solemnly. "Okay, Mama." They settled on a small bench near the kitchen door, their legs swinging. Naomi's heart squeezed. They were so good, so sweet. They deserved everything: a safe home, a happy mama, a future full of possibilities. That's why she took jobs like this, even when they made her stomach twist with nerves. She didn't know whose wedding it was. The booking had come through a fancy event planner who only gave her the address and the menu. Naomi hadn't asked questions. She just showed up, did her job, and went home. That's how she survived. Harper handed her a glass of water. "You're doing great, Naomi. This cake, it's a masterpiece. They're gonna love it." "Thanks." Naomi took a sip, then glanced toward the open window. She could hear the faint sound of an organ playing somewhere outside. "I think the ceremony's starting soon." "Good. Once they're all seated, we can start plating appetizers." Harper grinned. "Then we get paid and get out of here." Naomi laughed softly. That was Harper, always focused on the end game. The organ music swelled, and Naomi felt a strange pull in her chest. She walked to the window and looked out. Through the trees, she could see rows of white chairs set up in the garden, filled with guests in expensive suits and flowing dresses. At the front, beneath an archway covered in roses, stood a man in a black tuxedo. Even from this distance, even after 3 years, she knew that posture, the broad shoulders, the way he held himself, confident, controlled, like the world bent to his will. Ethan Caldwell. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be, but it was. She stepped back from the window, heart pounding. Harper was saying something, but Naomi couldn't hear her. The room felt too small, too hot. She pressed a hand to her chest and tried to breathe. "Naomi?" Harper's voice cut through the fog. "Hey, you okay?" Naomi swallowed hard. "I need a minute." She didn't wait for Harper to respond. She walked out the back door and into the small courtyard behind the kitchen. The air was cooler here, shaded by magnolia trees. She leaned against the brick wall and closed her eyes. Ethan Caldwell. Of course it was his wedding. Of course. She should have known. Should have asked more questions. But she'd been so focused on the money, on keeping the bakery afloat, that she hadn't let herself think too hard about the details. 3 years ago, she'd worked in this house. Not as a caterer, as a cook. She'd been 26, fresh out of culinary school, grateful for the steady paycheck, and Ethan had been everything. Smart, kind, funny in a quiet way that made her smile when she least expected it. They'd talk late at night in the kitchen when everyone else was asleep. He'd sit on the counter, tie loose, and ask her about her dreams. She'd tell him about opening a bakery someday. He'd tell her about the buildings he wanted to design. And then one night he'd kissed her. It had felt like the world shifted, like everything she'd ever wanted was suddenly within reach. But it didn't last. His mother found out. Mrs. Caldwell, a woman who wore pearls like armor and spoke in clipped, cold sentences. She'd called Naomi into her office one morning and made it clear women like Naomi didn't belong in the Caldwell family. She offered money, enough to cover culinary school loans and then some, if Naomi would leave Charleston and never contact Ethan again. Naomi had refused the money, but she'd left anyway. What choice did she have? Mrs. Caldwell had power, connections, the ability to destroy any chance Naomi had at a future in this city. So she'd packed her things, written Ethan a letter explaining everything, and slipped it under his bedroom door before she left. She never heard from him again. 2 months later, she realized she was pregnant. She thought about telling him. She even drafted a dozen emails, rehearsed phone calls she never made. But every time she stopped herself. If he'd wanted to find her, he would have. If he'd cared, he would have fought for her. His silence said everything, so she did it alone. Worked double shifts, saved every penny, and gave birth to 2 beautiful boys who had her smile and Ethan's eyes. She built a life, a small bakery with Harper, a little apartment where the twins could run and play. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. And now here she was, back in the place that had broken her heart, baking a wedding cake for the man who'd let her go. Naomi. She opened her eyes. Harper stood in the doorway, worry etched across her face. "You don't have to do this," Harper said quietly. "We can pack up and leave right now. I'll handle it." Naomi shook her head. "No, we need this job. And it's been 3 years. I'm fine." Harper didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Okay, but if you change your mind, I won't." Naomi pushed off the wall and walked back inside. The twins were still on the bench, coloring with crayons Harper must have found for them. They looked up when she entered, and Micah held up his paper. "Look, Mama, I made a truck." She smiled, crouched down, and kissed the top of his head. "It's beautiful, baby." Miles tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, when do we go home?" "Soon, sweetheart. Just a little longer." She stood and returned to the counter, focusing on the task in front of her, plating appetizers, checking the timeline, staying busy. That's how she'd get through this. The ceremony outside continued. She could hear the officiant's voice, faint but steady, carrying through the open window. She tried not to listen, tried not to picture Ethan standing beneath those roses, saying vows to someone else. But the twins were restless now. Micah slid off the bench and wandered toward the door leading to the garden. Naomi turned just in time to see him push it open. "Micah, no!" But he was already outside, Miles right behind him. "Harper, watch the tarts!" Naomi dropped the spoon and hurried after them, her heart racing. The garden was full of people, the ceremony still in progress. She couldn't let the boys disrupt. She stopped. The twins were running, not toward her, toward the archway, toward Ethan. "Daddy!" Micah shouted, his small voice cutting through the music like a knife. "Daddy!" The world seemed to freeze. Ethan turned, his face pale, his eyes wide. The bride, a slender woman in white lace, stepped back, confusion flickering across her features. The guests gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire through the rows of chairs. Naomi's legs moved before her brain could catch up. She ran forward, scooping up Micah just as he reached the archway. Miles was already tugging on Ethan's pant leg, grinning up at him like he'd just found his favorite toy. "I'm so sorry," Naomi said, her voice shaking. She grabbed Miles and held both boys against her chest. "I'm so sorry. They didn't mean—" Her eyes met Ethan's. For a moment, neither of them moved. She saw recognition flash across his face, shock, disbelief, something else she couldn't name. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The bride took another step back, her hand pressed to her chest. Ethan. The officiant cleared his throat, clearly unsure whether to continue, and then Mrs. Caldwell stood from her seat in the front row. Her face was white, her lips pressed into a thin line. She swayed slightly, and the man beside her, Ethan's father, Naomi assumed, caught her arm. "Naomi!" Ethan's voice was hoarse, barely audible. She couldn't stay. She couldn't do this. Not here. Not now. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. Then she turned and ran, the twins clutched tight in her arms. Behind her, the garden erupted in chaos, voices rising, cameras flashing, someone calling for water. But Naomi didn't look back. She pushed through the kitchen door, grabbed her purse, and told Harper in a shaking voice that they needed to leave. Harper didn't argue. She threw supplies into a box, grabbed her keys, and followed Naomi to the van parked behind the estate. Naomi buckled the twins into their car seats, her hands trembling so badly she could barely manage the straps. Micah reached for her, his small fingers wrapping around hers. "Mama, why are you crying?" She hadn't realized she was. She wiped her eyes quickly and forced a smile. "I'm not, baby, everything's okay." But it wasn't. And as Harper drove them away from the Caldwell estate, Naomi pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and let the tears fall. Ethan stood frozen beneath the rose-covered archway, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The twins, Naomi, the word that had cut through the ceremony like a lightning strike. "Daddy." He couldn't breathe. Lydia touched his arm, her voice soft but strained. "Ethan, what?" "I don't know." The words came out flat, automatic. But that was a lie. He did know, or at least pieces of it were starting to click together in his mind, forming a picture he didn't want to see. The guests were still whispering, the murmurs growing louder. His mother had collapsed into her chair, fanning herself with a program, while his father looked on, pale and grim. The officiant had stepped back, clearly at a loss. Ethan's chest felt tight, his hands clenched at his sides. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely steady. Then he turned and walked, ran, toward the kitchen. The catering room was empty. The counter still held trays of food, but the people were gone. He pushed through the back door and into the courtyard, looking wildly around. No one. Damn it! He raked a hand through his hair, his pulse hammering in his ears. Those boys. They'd looked just like... No, he couldn't think about that right now. He needed to find Naomi. He needed answers. He pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the screen. He didn't have her number. He didn't even know where she lived anymore. 3 years, and he'd convinced himself she was gone for good. That she'd wanted to leave, but the way she'd looked at him just now, terrified, heartbroken, told a different story. "Ethan." He turned. Lydia stood in the doorway, still in her wedding dress. Her makeup was perfect, her expression calm, but he could see the hurt in her eyes. "Lydia, She held up a hand. "Not here, let's go inside." He followed her back through the kitchen and into one of the estate's sitting rooms. She closed the door behind them and turned to face him, her hands clasped in front of her. "Do you know those children?" she asked quietly. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know, not for sure, but the way they'd called him Daddy, the way Naomi had looked at him. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think they might be." Lydia's face went very still. "Yours, maybe." She took a slow breath, then nodded. "Okay. Okay?" He stared at her. "Lydia, our wedding," was interrupted by something that clearly matters more than vows we haven't finished saying. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor beneath it. "Ethan, I care about you. I do. But I'm not going to stand at an altar and marry a man who just found out he might have children he didn't know about. I didn't," his voice cracked. "I didn't know. I believe you." She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it once before letting go. "But you need to figure this out, and I need time to think." He nodded, guilt and relief warring in his chest. "I'm sorry. I know." She smoothed her dress, her composure slipping back into place. "I'll handle the guests. You go find her. Lydia, go, Ethan." He hesitated for only a moment. Then he turned and left, his mind already racing through possibilities. Where would Naomi go? How could he find her? He pulled out his phone and opened a browser, typing her name into the search bar. A moment later, results appeared. A small bakery in downtown Charleston, Harper and Naomi's sweet spot. He didn't waste another second. He grabbed his car keys from the entry table and headed for the door. Behind him, he heard his mother's voice, sharp and commanding. "Ethan Michael Caldwell, you stop right there." He paused, his jaw tightening. Then he turned. "Mrs. Caldwell stood in the hallway, her face pale but her posture rigid. His father was beside her, one hand on her elbow as if to steady her. "Mother," Ethan said carefully, "I need to go. You need to stay here and fix this disaster," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? The photographers, the guests, this is a nightmare." "A nightmare?" Ethan's voice rose despite himself. "Those kids called me Daddy. That woman, Naomi, I haven't seen her in 3 years, and she shows up here with 2 little boys who look just like me. So forgive me if I'm more concerned about that than what the guests are saying." His mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Ethan, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "What did you do?" "I did what I had to do." Her voice wavered just slightly. "That girl was not suitable for this family. I gave her an opportunity to move on with her life, and she took it." Ethan stared at her, the pieces finally clicking into place. "You paid her to leave." Mrs. Caldwell lifted her chin. "I offered her a way out. She accepted." "Did she?" His voice was shaking now. "Or did you threaten her? Make it impossible for her to stay?" His mother didn't answer, but the flicker of guilt in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. "Ethan, son," his father started, but Ethan held up a hand. "No, not now." He looked at his mother one last time. "If those kids are mine, if Naomi tried to tell me, and you kept it from me—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The anger was too big, too hot. He turned and walked out the door. The drive to downtown Charleston took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of white-knuckled gripping of the steering wheel, of scenarios spinning through his mind, of trying to prepare himself for whatever came next. The bakery was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The sign above the door was hand-painted, cheerful, with little cupcakes drawn in the corners. Through the window, he could see tables and chairs, a display case, shelves lined with colorful boxes. He parked and sat for a moment, his heart pounding. Then he got out and walked to the door. It was locked. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Naomi, it's Ethan, please, I just want to talk." Still nothing. He pressed his forehead against the glass, peering inside. The lights were off. The place looked empty. Damn it. He pulled out his phone and searched for a number, but the bakery's website only listed an email address. He was typing out a message when he heard a voice behind him. "She's not here." He turned. A woman stood on the sidewalk, tall, black, with short, natural hair and an expression that could cut glass. He recognized her from the kitchen, Naomi's friend. "Where is she?" Ethan asked. The woman, Harper, he remembered, crossed her arms. "Why should I tell you?" "Because I need to talk to her." "You had 3 years to talk to her." "You didn't." "I didn't know." He stopped, took a breath. "I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about the boys. My mother, she did something. She made Naomi leave, and I didn't find out until today." Harper studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "You really expect me to believe you didn't know? I don't care if you believe me or not. I just need to see her. Those boys are her whole world. If you're here to cause more trouble—" "I'm not." His voice broke slightly. I need to know if they're mine. And if they are, I need to—" He didn't know how to finish that sentence. Harper's expression softened, just a fraction. "She lives above the bakery, apartment 2B. But if you hurt her again, I swear—" "I won't, I promise." She stepped aside, pulling a key from her pocket and unlocking the bakery door. "Stairs are in the back." Ethan nodded and slipped inside. The bakery smelled like sugar and vanilla. It was cozy, warm, the kind of place that felt like home. He walked past the counter and found the narrow staircase leading up. At the top, there were 2 doors. One had a small brass plate that read 2B. He knocked softly. "Naomi? It's Ethan, please. Just let me talk to you." For a moment, there was only silence. Then the door opened. Naomi stood there, her eyes red-rimmed, her face exhausted. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw so many emotions flicker across her features. Anger, fear, sadness, something that might have been relief. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. "Because I need to know the truth." His voice was raw. "Are they mine?" She held his gaze. Then slowly she nodded. The world tilted. "Can I see them?" he whispered. Naomi hesitated. Then she stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was small but tidy. A couch, a kitchen table, toys scattered across the floor. And there, on the couch, the 2 boys sat side by side, watching a cartoon on a tablet. Ethan's breath caught. They looked like him, the shape of their faces, the curve of their eyebrows. And when one of them, Micah, he thought, looked up, Ethan saw his own eyes staring back. "Daddy!" Micah scrambled off the couch and ran to him, wrapping small arms around Ethan's leg. Ethan crouched down slowly, his hands shaking as he touched the boy's shoulder. "Hey, buddy!" Miles joined them, quieter but curious. "You came back." Ethan's throat closed. He looked up at Naomi, standing a few feet away with her arms wrapped around herself. "They remember you," she said softly. "From when we worked at the estate. They were just babies, but they remember." "I didn't know." The words came out broken. "Naomi, I swear I didn't know." She looked away, blinking hard. "Your mother told me you didn't want to hear from me, that you'd moved on." She lied. Anger flared in his chest again. "She lied to both of us." Naomi nodded slowly, like she'd already suspected as much. Ethan looked back at the boys. Micah was still clinging to him, and Miles had settled on the floor nearby, watching with wide, curious eyes. "I want to know them," Ethan said quietly. "I want to be their father, if you'll let me." Naomi's expression was unreadable. "Why now?" "Because now I know." He stood, facing her fully. "I know what I lost, what we lost. And I can't," his voice cracked, "I can't walk away again." She studied him for a long time. Then finally she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "But we do this my way. Slow, careful, for their sake. Whatever you need." She turned away, wiping her eyes quickly. "You should go. It's been a long day." He wanted to argue, wanted to stay, but he could see the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly. "Okay." He crouched down again and ruffled Micah's hair. "I'll see you soon, okay?" "Promise?" Micah asked. "Promise." Miles gave him a small wave, and Ethan's heart broke all over again. He stood and walked to the door. Naomi followed him, opening it, but not meeting his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded. Then, just before he stepped into the hall, she said, "Ethan?" He turned. "I tried to tell you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I left you a letter, but you never responded." He froze. "A letter? Under your door. The night I left." He thought back, searching his memory. He'd been traveling that week, a last-minute trip for a project in Atlanta. When he got back, his mother had told him Naomi quit, that she'd found a better opportunity somewhere else. He'd been hurt, confused, but he hadn't questioned it. "I never got it," he said, his voice hollow. Naomi closed her eyes. "Of course you didn't." And then she shut the door. Ethan stood in the hallway for a long time, his mind spinning. Then he walked down the stairs, out of the bakery and into the fading evening light. He had a lot to fix, and he was going to start with his mother. The next morning, Charleston woke to headlines. Ethan sat in his downtown apartment, a sleek, modern space that suddenly felt too empty, staring at his phone. The screen glowed with article after article, each one more invasive than the last. Caldwell wedding interrupted by mystery children. Charleston architect's secret family scandal. Who is Naomi Lewis? There were photos, grainy shots from the ceremony, the twins running toward him, Naomi's horrified face, Lydia stepping back in her white dress. Someone had been quick with their camera phone. Someone always was. His jaw clenched. He scrolled through the comments, each one making his stomach turn. Gold digger. Poor Lydia. Those kids are probably not even his. He threw the phone onto the couch and stood, pacing to the window. The city spread out before him. Church spires, historic buildings, the harbor glinting in the distance. Beautiful, suffocating. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. 23 missed calls, 15 texts, most from his mother, a few from colleagues, one from Lydia's sister that he didn't dare open. He ignored them all. Instead, he pulled up the bakery's website again, Harper and Naomi's sweet spot. The photos showed a cheerful storefront, display cases filled with pastries, two women smiling behind the counter. Naomi looked happy in those pictures, proud. Had she lost business yet? The thought made his chest tight. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. The bakery was closed when he arrived. A handwritten sign hung in the window. "Closed today. Sorry for the inconvenience." Ethan's stomach dropped. He knocked anyway, hoping Harper might be inside. No answer. He was turning to leave when he heard a voice. "Looking for someone?" He spun. Naomi stood on the sidewalk holding 2 grocery bags. She wore jeans and a simple blue t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, guarded. "I wanted to check on you," Ethan said. "Make sure you were okay." She glanced at the bags in her hands, then at him. "I'm fine. The bakery's closed." "Yeah, I needed a day." She walked past him and unlocked the door. People were calling all morning, reporters. Some of them weren't very nice. Guilt twisted in his gut. "Naomi, I'm so sorry." She pushed the door open but didn't invite him in. "Why are you here, Ethan?" "Because this is my fault. The media, the attention. You shouldn't have to deal with that alone." "I'm not alone. I have Harper." She set the bags down just inside the door. "And the boys are with my neighbor upstairs. We're managing. Let me help." She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "How? I don't know yet, but I can start by making a statement, telling people the truth, that I didn't know about the boys, that you're not—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "That you're not what they're saying you are." Naomi's laugh was bitter. "And what am I, Ethan? Someone I cared about. Someone who deserves better than this." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Come inside." But just for a minute. He followed her into the bakery. It was dim, the chairs still stacked on the tables from the night before. She flipped on the lights and walked behind the counter, pulling out a pitcher of sweet tea from the refrigerator. "Want some?" she asked. "Sure." She poured 2 glasses and handed him one. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. "I went to see my mother last night," Ethan said finally. "After I left your place." Naomi's hand tightened around her glass. "And?" She admitted it. "That she paid you to leave. That she lied to me about where you went." His voice was flat, controlled, but anger simmered beneath. "She said she was protecting the family. She was protecting her image," Naomi corrected quietly. "I was never going to be good enough for the Caldwells. She made that clear. I should have fought for you." The words came out raw. "I should have looked harder, tried to find you. Instead, I just believed what I was told." Naomi set her glass down and crossed her arms. "You were 28, Ethan. You had your whole life mapped out. A career, a family name to uphold. I was just the girl who worked in the kitchen. You were never just anything to me." She looked away. "Maybe. But that doesn't change what happened." He wanted to argue, to tell her that he'd been lost without her, that nothing had felt right since she left. But he could see the walls she'd built, the way she held herself at a distance. 3 years of pain didn't disappear because he showed up with apologies. "The boys," he said instead. "Can I see them again?" Naomi hesitated. "They're confused, Ethan. Yesterday was a lot for them. They don't understand why you left after the wedding, why everything was so chaotic. Then let me explain, or at least let me spend time with them, so they know I'm serious." She studied him, her eyes searching his face for something. Sincerity, maybe, or proof that he wouldn't disappear again. "Okay," she said finally, "but slow. Like I said, you don't just get to walk in and be their dad overnight." "I know. And if you hurt them, I won't." He met her eyes. "I promise." She nodded slowly. "They're with Mrs. Chen upstairs. I'll bring them down." She disappeared through a door at the back of the shop. Ethan stood alone in the bakery, his heart pounding. He felt like he was standing on the edge of something huge, something that could either save him or break him completely. A few minutes later, Naomi returned with the twins. Micah ran ahead, grinning when he saw Ethan. "Daddy, you came back!" Ethan crouched down, and Micah threw his arms around his neck. The weight of it, the trust, the easy affection, made Ethan's throat tighten. Miles followed more slowly, hanging back near Naomi's legs. Ethan smiled at him. "Hey, Miles, you doing okay?" Miles nodded but didn't move closer. "He's shy," Naomi said softly. "Give him time." Ethan straightened, Micah still clinging to his hand. "I was thinking, maybe we could go to the park, if that's okay with your mom." Micah turned to Naomi, his eyes pleading. "Please, Mama?" Naomi looked between them, then sighed. "Okay, but I'm coming with you." "Of course." They walked the 3 blocks to the park in relative silence. Micah chattered the whole way, pointing out dogs and cars and birds, his small hand warm in Ethan's. Miles walked beside Naomi, holding her hand but glancing over at Ethan every few steps. The park was busy, families on blankets, kids on the playground, joggers weaving along the path. Naomi led them to a bench near the swings, and Ethan helped the boys climb onto the seats. "Push us," Micah demanded. Ethan obliged, giving them gentle pushes while they squealed with laughter. Over the tops of their heads he caught Naomi's eye. She was watching him carefully, her expression softer than it had been. "Higher," Miles shouted, his shyness forgotten in the thrill of the swing. Ethan laughed. "You sure?" "Yeah." He pushed a little harder, and both boys shrieked with delight. For a moment everything else fell away. The scandal, the headlines, the mess he'd left behind. It was just this, Sunlight and laughter and two little boys who looked at him like he hung the moon. When they finally tired of the swings, they ran to the sandbox. Ethan sat on the bench beside Naomi, watching them dig and build. "They're amazing," he said quietly. "Yeah." Naomi's voice was thick. "They are. Thank you for this, for letting me be here." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'm not doing it for you. I know." She turned to look at him. "I'm doing it for them. They deserve to know their father. Even if I don't deserve them." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the park filling the space between them. Then Naomi said, "What happened with Lydia?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "She called off the wedding, said she needed time to think." "I'm sorry. Don't be. She deserves better than what I put her through." He paused. "She was kind about it, actually. More kind than I deserved." Naomi nodded slowly. "She seemed nice at the wedding." "She is." Ethan looked at her. "But she's not you." Naomi's breath hitched. She looked away quickly. Don't what?" "Don't say things like that. Not now. Not when everything's so complicated." "I'm not trying to complicate things. I'm just being honest." She stood abruptly. "I need to check on the boys." She walked toward the sandbox, leaving Ethan on the bench. He watched her crouch beside Micah, brushing sand off his shirt, her movements gentle and practiced. She was a good mother, the kind of mother who put her kids first, even when it cost her. Ethan had missed so much. First smiles, first steps, first words. 2.5 years of moments he'd never get back. And it was his mother's fault, but it was his too for not questioning, not looking harder. He pulled out his phone and opened a new email. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then he started typing. "To the Caldwell Estate staff and family board, effective immediately, I am taking a leave of absence from all family business matters." That evening, Naomi stood in her small kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce while the boys played in the living room. Harper sat at the table, scrolling through her phone with a frown. "It's getting worse," Harper said. Naomi didn't need to ask what she meant. "How bad?" "Bad. People are leaving reviews on our website. Most of them aren't even real customers. They're just trolls. And someone posted our address online." Naomi's hand stilled on the spoon. "What?" "I reported it, but—" Harper set the phone down. "Naomi, maybe we should close for a few days. Let things cool off. We can't afford to close. We can't afford to have our windows broken either." Naomi closed her eyes. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her dream, and now it was turning into a nightmare. "Ethan offered to help," she said quietly. Harper raised an eyebrow. "How?" "I don't know. He said he'd make a statement or something." "Do you trust him?" Naomi didn't answer. She turned off the stove and called the boys for dinner. They climbed into their chairs, Micah chattering about the park, Miles quieter but smiling. "Daddy pushed us on the swings," Micah announced. Harper's eyes widened. "Daddy, huh?" Miles nodded. "He's strong." Naomi served their plates, her heart aching. They were so happy, so innocent. They didn't understand what was happening beyond their small world. After dinner, she bathed the boys and tucked them into their beds. 2 small mattresses on the floor of her bedroom. They shared the space, the apartment too small for separate rooms, but it was cozy, safe. "Mama," Micah whispered as she pulled the blanket up to his chin. "Yeah, baby? Is Daddy gonna come back tomorrow?" She hesitated. "I don't know, maybe. I hope so." She kissed his forehead. "Me too." Miles was already asleep, his thumb in his mouth. Naomi smoothed his hair back and whispered a prayer over them both. Then she stood and walked back to the living room. Harper was still there now with a glass of wine in hand. She poured a second glass and handed it to Naomi. "You okay?" Harper asked. "I don't know." Naomi sank onto the couch. "I thought I'd moved on, built a life, and then he just shows up, and suddenly I'm back to being 26 and terrified." "He didn't know, Naomi." "I know. So maybe give him a chance." Naomi took a sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through her. "What if he leaves again? What if the boys get attached and he decides it's too hard? Then we'll deal with it, like we deal with everything." Harper squeezed her hand. "But what if he doesn't leave? What if he's serious?" Naomi didn't have an answer for that. The next morning, Ethan showed up at the bakery at 8 o'clock. Naomi had just unlocked the door, and Harper was setting up the display case. "Morning," he said, holding up a cardboard tray of coffee cups. "I brought breakfast." Harper looked at Naomi, eyebrow raised. Naomi sighed. "Come in." He set the coffees on the counter. "I also brought something else." He handed Naomi a folded piece of paper. She opened it and scanned the contents. It was a press statement, carefully worded, taking full responsibility for the situation, explaining that he'd only just learned about his sons and was committed to being in their lives. It named Naomi respectfully, calling her a talented chef and devoted mother. "You're really going to release this?" she asked. "Already did. This morning. It's on my company's website and sent to every major outlet." Harper leaned over to read it. "Damn. You didn't hold back. I'm done hiding." Ethan looked at Naomi. "You didn't ask for any of this. The least I can do is tell the truth." Naomi felt something shift in her chest. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "Thank you," he nodded. Then he glanced around the empty bakery. "You're open today?" "We have to be." "Then let me help." "Ethan, you don't know how to—" "I can learn." He rolled up his sleeves. "Put me to work." Harper grinned. "I like him." Naomi shook her head, but she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. "Fine, you can start by wiping down the tables." He mock saluted. "Yes, ma'am." The morning passed slowly. A few customers came in, most of them regulars who offered Naomi sympathetic smiles and didn't mention the headlines. Ethan worked quietly, cleaning tables, refilling napkin dispensers, even learning to operate the espresso machine under Harper's patient instruction. Around noon, the bell above the door chimed. Naomi looked up from the register and froze. Mrs. Caldwell stood in the doorway. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing than Naomi remembered. Her pearls were still in place, her dress still perfectly pressed, but her face was drawn, tired. Harper stepped forward. "We reserve the right to refuse service." Mrs. Caldwell ignored her. "I'd like to speak with Naomi. Alone." "Not happening," Harper said flatly. "It's okay." Naomi touched Harper's arm. "Give us a minute." Harper looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded and stepped into the back room. Ethan, who'd been restocking cups near the coffee station, stayed put. "Mrs. Caldwell," Naomi said carefully, "what can I do for you?" The older woman stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "I came to apologize." Naomi blinked. "Excuse me? I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." Mrs. Caldwell's voice wavered. "I thought I was protecting my son, protecting our family. But I was wrong." Ethan moved closer, his jaw tight. "Mother." "No, Ethan, let me speak." She turned back to Naomi. "I lied to you. I lied to my son. And because of that, he missed 2.5 years with his children. You raised them alone when you shouldn't have had to. She paused, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry." Naomi stared at her. She'd imagined this moment before, Mrs. Caldwell apologizing, groveling, admitting she was wrong. But now that it was happening, she didn't feel the satisfaction she'd expected. She just felt tired. "Why now?" Naomi asked. "Why not 3 years ago?" "Because I was a coward." Mrs. Caldwell's eyes glistened. "And because I've spent the last 2 days watching my son fall apart. I've seen what I took from him, from all of you, and I can't undo it. But I can at least admit it." Naomi took a slow breath. "Your apology doesn't fix anything. I know. And it doesn't mean I trust you. I know that too." Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on Naomi's shoulder. "You don't have to accept this." Naomi looked at him, then back at his mother. Mrs. Caldwell looked genuinely broken, lost, and Naomi knew what it was like to carry guilt that heavy. "I have 2 sons," Naomi said quietly, "and someday they're going to ask about their grandmother. What do I tell them?" Mrs. Caldwell's breath caught. I would like the chance to be in their lives, if you'll allow it." Naomi didn't answer right away. She thought about the twins, about how much love they had to give, about how they deserved a family, a full one, messy and complicated as it might be. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Mrs. Caldwell nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you." She turned and walked to the door. Just before she left, she looked back at Ethan. "I'm proud of you for doing what I should have done." Then she was gone. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I didn't know she was coming here." "It's okay." Naomi leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. I think she meant it." "Does that change anything?" "I don't know." She looked up at him. "Does it for you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It doesn't change what she did, but maybe it's a start." Harper emerged from the back room, her arms crossed. "Everyone good?" "Yeah." Naomi managed a small smile. "We're good." The rest of the day passed without incident. Ethan stayed until closing, helping clean up and even attempting to decorate a batch of cupcakes under Harper's watchful eye. His results were clumsy but earnest, and Naomi found herself laughing for the first time in days. As they locked up, Ethan turned to her. "Can I come by tomorrow to see the boys?" They'd like that. He smiled. Soft, genuine. So would I. Naomi watched him leave, his figure disappearing into the Charleston evening. And for the first time since the wedding, she felt something that might have been hope. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Naomi hadn't expected. Ethan came to the bakery every morning. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he brought pastries from other shops, which Harper would critique mercilessly until Naomi laughed so hard her sides hurt. He'd help set up, wiping tables and arranging chairs, then stay through the morning rush. He learned to work the register, fumbling at first but improving each day. Customers started to recognize him, and slowly, the whispers turned from scandalized to curious to something almost accepting. In the afternoons, he'd spend time with the twins. They'd go to the park or the library, or sometimes just sit on the floor of Naomi's apartment building blocks into towers that Micah would gleefully knock down. Miles warmed to him gradually, his shyness melting away until he was climbing into Ethan's lap to show him pictures in his favorite books. Naomi watched it all from a careful distance, her heart doing complicated things she didn't want to examine too closely. It was Thursday afternoon when Harper cornered her in the bakery kitchen. "Okay, we need to talk," Harper said, hands on her hips. Naomi looked up from the batch of lemon bars she was preparing. "About what?" "About the fact that you're in love with that man and you're acting like you're not." "Harper, don't Harper me. I've known you for 6 years. I know that look." Harper pointed at her with a wooden spoon. "You get all soft around the edges when he's with the boys. And when he looks at you, girl, if that man's eyes were hands, you'd be pregnant again." "Harper," Naomi's face heated. That's not what? Not true." Harper crossed her arms. "Naomi, I'm not saying you have to jump back into anything. Lord knows you've got every right to be careful. But don't pretend there's nothing there." Naomi set down the mixing bowl and leaned against the counter. "It's not that simple. Love never is. He left before, or he didn't fight for me. Same difference. He didn't know the truth, but he didn't question it either." Naomi's voice dropped. "When his mother told him I was gone, he just accepted it. What if that happens again? What if things get hard and he just walks away?" Harper was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What if he doesn't?" Before Naomi could answer, the bell above the front door chimed. Harper peeked out of the kitchen and groaned. "You've got to be kidding me." "What?" "It's Lydia." Naomi's stomach dropped. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the front of the shop. Lydia Brooks stood near the entrance, elegant in a cream-colored dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a low bun. She looked exactly like the kind of woman who should have married Ethan Caldwell, poised, refined, perfectly put together. Naomi suddenly felt very aware of the flour on her cheek and the chocolate stain on her apron. "Hi," Lydia said, her voice soft. "I hope it's okay that I came." "Of course." Naomi forced a smile. "Can I get you something? Coffee, a pastry?" "Actually, I was hoping we could talk, if you have time." Harper materialized at Naomi's elbow. "I've got the front. Take your time." Naomi led Lydia to a small table in the corner, away from the few customers browsing the display case. They sat across from each other, and for a moment neither spoke. "I'm sorry about the wedding," Naomi said finally. "I never meant—" "I know." Lydia held up a hand. "That's not why I'm here." "Okay." Lydia folded her hands on the table, her engagement ring noticeably absent. "I came to return something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Ethan's grandmother's ring. Naomi had seen it before, years ago, when Mrs. Caldwell had worn it at family dinners. "I don't understand," Naomi said. "Ethan asked me to give this back to his mother, but I think—" Lydia paused. "I think it should go to you." Naomi's heart stuttered. "Lydia, I can't— I'm not saying you have to do anything with it, but Ethan loves you. He probably always has." Lydia's smile was sad but genuine. "I knew it before the wedding. Maybe I knew it when he proposed, but I thought maybe love could grow, that maybe I could be enough." "You are enough," Naomi said quietly. "Lydia, I'm not the woman he dreams about at 3 in the morning. I'm not the one he looks for in every room, and I'm not the mother of his children." Lydia pushed the box across the table. "You are. So this belongs with you." Naomi stared at the box. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know—" Lydia's voice wavered slightly. "I'm not angry. I'm not your enemy. And I think you and Ethan could be really happy if you let yourselves." She stood, smoothing her dress. Naomi stood too, fumbling for words. "Thank you," Naomi managed, "for being kind. You didn't have to be." "Yes, I did." Lydia reached out and squeezed Naomi's hand. "Take care of him, and those beautiful boys." Then she walked out, the bell chiming softly behind her. Naomi sank back into the chair, staring at the velvet box. Harper appeared immediately. "What just happened?" "I have no idea." Naomi opened the box. The ring inside was beautiful, vintage, with a cluster of small diamonds that caught the light. It was the kind of ring that meant family, legacy, forever. "Holy," Harper breathed. "Is that what I think it is?" "I think so." "Girl, what are you going to do with it?" Naomi closed the box and slipped it into her apron pocket. "I don't know, but right now I need to finish those lemon bars." Harper laughed. "That's my girl. When in doubt, bake." That evening, Ethan arrived at the apartment just as Naomi was putting dinner on the table. The twins shrieked with excitement when they saw him, nearly knocking him over with their hugs. "Hey, easy," Ethan laughed, ruffling their hair. "I saw you this morning." "But we missed you," Micah declared. Miles nodded solemnly. "You're our favorite." Ethan's eyes found Naomi's over their heads, and something warm passed between them. "Have you eaten?" Naomi asked. "I made extra. I don't want to intrude." "You're not. Sit." He sat. They ate spaghetti and garlic bread while the twins chattered about their day, a bug they'd found, a song they'd learned, the picture Miles had drawn that was currently magnetized to the refrigerator. It was domestic, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. After dinner, Ethan helped with bath time. He was getting better at it, no longer surprised when water ended up everywhere or when the twins decided to turn shampoo into bubble sculptures. Naomi watched from the doorway, her chest tight. "Daddy, can you read us a story?" Miles asked as they climbed into their beds. "If your mom says it's okay." Naomi nodded. "Go ahead." Ethan settled on the floor between their mattresses and opened the book Micah handed him. It was about a bear who couldn't find his way home. The twins snuggled under their blankets, eyes heavy, as Ethan read in a soft, steady voice. By the time he finished, both boys were asleep. Ethan stood carefully and followed Naomi out of the bedroom. She pulled the door mostly closed, leaving it cracked just enough to hear if they called out. "You're good with them," she said quietly. "I'm learning," he smiled. "They make it easy." They moved to the small living room. Naomi poured 2 glasses of sweet tea and handed him one. They sat on the couch, a careful distance between them, the only sound the hum of the window air conditioner. "Lydia came to see me today," Naomi said. Ethan straightened. "She did? She returned your grandmother's ring." Naomi pulled the box from her pocket and set it on the coffee table. "She said it should go to me." Ethan stared at the box, his jaw working. "Naomi, I didn't ask her to—" "I know, she did it on her own." Naomi traced the edge of her glass. "She seems like a really good person." "She is. Then why didn't you love her?" The question hung in the air. Ethan looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the answer before he spoke. "Because she wasn't you." Naomi's breath caught. "Ethan, I tried. I really did. After you left, I tried to move on, dated other women, met Lydia at a charity gala 2 years ago, and thought maybe this could work. She was everything I was supposed to want, smart, kind, from a good family. My mother approved. Everything made sense on paper. But every time I kissed her, I thought about you. Every time I tried to picture a future, you were in it instead." He set his glass down and turned to face her fully. "I never stopped loving you, Naomi. Not for one single day." Tears pricked her eyes. "You don't get to say that." "Why not?" "Because it's not fair." Her voice broke. "You weren't there. When I found out I was pregnant, when I gave birth alone, when I spent 2 years wondering if I made the right choice by not trying harder to find you, you weren't there, and I survived. I built a life. I can't just fall back into loving you because you showed up and said the right words." "I know." His voice was rough. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway." "Why?" "Because those boys in there, they're the best thing that ever happened to me. And their mother." He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. "Their mother is the strongest, most incredible person I've ever met. And if I can spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you, then maybe I can make up for the years I lost." Naomi looked down at their joined hands. His was larger, his fingers rough from the manual work he'd been doing at the bakery. She'd forgotten how warm he was. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. What if your mother changes her mind? What if the gossip doesn't stop? What if—" "Then we deal with it together." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Naomi. Not unless you tell me to." She met his eyes. In them she saw the boy she'd fallen in love with in a Charleston kitchen 3 years ago, but she also saw something new, A man who'd been humbled, who'd lost something precious, and now understood its value. "I need time," she said finally. "Take all the time you need, and you have to keep showing up, not just for me, for them, even when it's hard." "I will." She nodded slowly. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me," she smiled. "Small, but real. Don't make me regret it." The next few weeks passed in a blur of flower, laughter, and tentative hope. Ethan was true to his word. He showed up every day, rain or shine. He learned to decorate cookies with Harper's exacting standards. He fixed the wobbly table in the corner and repaired the broken shelf in the kitchen. He became a fixture at the bakery, and slowly people stopped staring. The media attention faded. New scandals emerged, more interesting than a wealthy architect and his secret family. Orders picked up again. Regular customers returned, and new ones trickled in. Mrs. Caldwell came by twice. The first time, Naomi let her sit with the twins for 20 minutes under Harper's watchful eye. The second time, she brought gifts, wooden trains that the boys immediately loved. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just showed up, quiet and respectful, trying to earn back what she'd destroyed. Naomi wasn't ready to forget, but she was learning to forgive. One Saturday afternoon, Harper suggested a community event, a charity dessert tasting to raise money for the local children's hospital. Naomi hesitated, worried about the attention, but Ethan offered his firm's courtyard as a venue. It was beautiful. Brick walls, string lights, enough space for tables and a small stage. They spent a week preparing. Naomi baked until her hands ached. Cookies, tarts, cakes, pastries. Harper designed the layout. Ethan handled logistics, permits, and promotion. The day of the event, the courtyard filled with people, families, couples, groups of friends, all there to support a good cause and enjoy good food. The twins wore matching bow ties and charmed every guest they met. Micah handed out samples with enthusiastic recommendations. Miles, quieter but just as earnest, collected donations in a small basket. Naomi stood behind the dessert table, watching it all with something like wonder. "You did this," Harper said, appearing at her elbow. "Look at what you built." "We did this," Naomi corrected. "Okay, fine. We're amazing," Harper grinned. "But seriously, Naomi, you should be proud." She was. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. A reporter approached, a young woman with kind eyes and a small notebook. "Naomi Lewis?" Naomi tensed. "Yes? I'm with the Charleston Chronicle. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about the bakery, the event, your story." "I don't know if—" "It's okay," Ethan said, materializing beside her. "We'll do it together." Naomi looked at him, then nodded. The interview was short, painless. The reporter asked about the bakery, about the charity event, about how they'd managed to rebuild after the scandal. Naomi answered honestly, talking about hard work, community support, second chances. Ethan added comments here and there, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. At the end, the reporter asked, "Is reconciliation possible? For you two?" Naomi glanced at Ethan. He looked back at her, steady and sure. "For the children's sake," Naomi said carefully. "Always." But the smile she gave Ethan said more than her words did. That evening, after the event ended and the courtyard was cleaned up, Ethan drove Naomi and the twins home. The boys fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement. "Thank you," Naomi said quietly, as Ethan pulled up outside her building. "For today, for everything. I should be thanking you." "For what?" "For letting me be part of this, part of your life." He turned to look at her, his eyes soft in the dim light. "I know I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful. Every day." Naomi felt her resolve crumbling. The walls she'd built so carefully were full of cracks now, letting light through. "Ethan, You don't have to say anything." He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just want you to know." She caught his hand before he could pull away, held it against her cheek. "I'm falling for you again." His breath hitched. "Yeah? Yeah. And it terrifies me. We can go slow." "How slow?" He smiled. "As slow as you need." She leaned across the console and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate kisses they'd shared years ago. But it was real, true, a promise of something that could grow if they were careful with it. When she pulled back, his eyes were shining. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed you too." In the back seat, Micah stirred. "Mama?" Naomi pulled away, her cheeks warm. "Yeah, baby? Are we home?" We're home. Ethan helped carry the boys upstairs. They tucked them in together, Ethan reading one last story while Naomi straightened their blankets. When both boys were asleep, they stood in the doorway watching them breathe. I never want to miss another moment, Ethan said quietly. Then don't, Naomi said. And for the first time, she truly believed he wouldn't. 3 weeks later, Naomi woke to her phone buzzing on the nightstand. She fumbled for it in the pre-dawn darkness, squinting at the screen. Harper's name flashed across it. "Hello?" she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Have you seen the article?" Naomi sat up, suddenly alert. "What article?" "The one in the Chronicle. From that interview at the charity event." Harper's voice was tight. "Naomi, it's not good." Her stomach dropped. "What does it say?" "Just read it. I'll be over in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Naomi's hands shook as she pulled up the Charleston Chronicle's website. The article loaded slowly, and when it did, the headline hit her like a punch to the gut. "Second chances or second thoughts? Questions remain about Naomi Lewis and the Caldwell fortune." She skimmed the text, each paragraph worse than the last. The reporter, a different one from the event, had dug into Naomi's past, her student loans, the timing of when she'd left the Caldwell estate, the fact that she'd never publicly sought child support. The article framed it all as suspicious, suggesting she'd been waiting for the right moment to reveal the twins, that the interrupted wedding was calculated, strategic. While Ms. Lewis claims she never sought financial gain, sources close to the family suggest otherwise. The question remains, why wait 3 years to come forward? Naomi's vision blurred. She read it again, then a third time, hoping she'd misunderstood, but the words didn't change. In the bedroom, one of the twins stirred. She wiped her eyes quickly and checked on them. Both still asleep, Micah's arm thrown over Miles's shoulder. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Ethan. "I saw it. I'm coming over." She wanted to tell him not to, wanted to handle this herself, but her fingers wouldn't type the words. 20 minutes later, Harper burst through the door with coffee and a fierce expression. 5 minutes after that, Ethan arrived, still in yesterday's shirt, his hair uncombed. "This is garbage," he said without preamble. "Complete garbage. I'm calling my lawyer." "It won't help," Naomi said quietly. She sat at her small kitchen table, hands wrapped around the coffee Harper had brought. "They didn't print anything that's technically untrue. They just twisted it." "They made you sound like a gold digger," Harper said flatly. "That's slander. It's implication, that's different." Naomi took a shaky breath. "And people believe implications." Her phone buzzed again, then again. Text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. She turned it face down on the table. Ethan sat beside her, his jaw tight. "I'm releasing a statement. Today, setting the record straight. That'll just keep the story alive." "Then what do you want me to do?" She looked at him, exhausted. "I don't know." The twins emerged from the bedroom, rubbing their eyes. Micah climbed into Naomi's lap immediately, sensing her distress. Miles went to Ethan, who lifted him up automatically. "Mama sad?" Micah asked, his small hand patting her cheek. "No, baby. Mama's just tired." But Harper was already scrolling through her phone, her expression darkening. "The comments section is a nightmare, and it's been shared on social media. Naomi, I think we need to close the bakery today." "We can't keep closing. We can't have another mob scene either." Naomi closed her eyes. This was supposed to be over. They'd survived the initial scandal, rebuilt trust, started to find their footing, and now— "I have an idea," Ethan said quietly. Both women looked at him. "What if we didn't hide? What if we faced this head-on?" "How?" Naomi asked. "A press conference. At the bakery. We invite the media, answer their questions honestly, and show them there's nothing to hide." Harper shook her head. "That's a terrible idea. You never give trolls a platform." "We're not giving them a platform. We're taking control of the narrative." Ethan looked at Naomi. "But only if you're comfortable with it." Naomi thought about the article, about the comments she hadn't read but could imagine, about the way people would whisper when she walked down the street. She'd spent 3 years building a quiet life, staying under the radar, protecting her sons, and in one morning, all of that had been ripped away. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe hiding wasn't the answer anymore. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." By noon, word had spread. The bakery's small storefront was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Harper had set up a simple podium near the counter, and Naomi stood behind it, her hands gripping the edges to keep them from shaking. Ethan stood beside her, not in front, not behind. Beside, a united front. "Thank you for coming," Naomi began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know there's been a lot of speculation about my relationship with Ethan Caldwell and about my sons, so I wanted to take a few minutes to set the record straight." She told the story simply. Meeting Ethan when she worked at the estate, falling in love, his mother's intervention, the letter she'd written that he'd never received, finding out she was pregnant after she'd already left Charleston. "I didn't come forward because I was scared," she said. "Scared of being judged, scared of disrupting Ethan's life, scared that I wouldn't be believed." She paused. "The wedding was a complete accident. I took the catering job because I needed the money, not because I knew whose wedding it was. And my sons, they're 2 years old. They didn't understand they were interrupting anything. They just saw someone they recognized and ran to him." A reporter raised her hand. "But why didn't you seek child support? That's what most single mothers would do." "Because I didn't want to force Ethan into a relationship with children he didn't know existed, and because I was afraid his mother would try to take them from me." Naomi's voice wavered. "I've spent 3 years building a life for my boys, a safe life. Coming forward felt like risking all of that." Another reporter spoke up. "Mr. Caldwell, what's your response to allegations that Ms. Lewis waited for a strategic moment to reveal the children?" Ethan leaned toward the microphone. "My response is that anyone who knows Naomi would never believe that. She's the most honest person I've ever met. She didn't come to my wedding to make a scene. She came to do her job, and when the truth came out, she handled it with more grace than I did." "So, you're in a relationship now?" Ethan glanced at Naomi. She nodded slightly. "We're figuring things out," he said. "Taking it slow, but yes, we're together, and I'm committed to being a father to my sons and a partner to Naomi, however long that takes." "What about your mother's involvement?" "My mother made serious mistakes," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "She lied to both of us, and those lies cost us years we can't get back. She's apologized, and we're working toward forgiveness, but that doesn't excuse what she did." The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Some were fair, others were designed to provoke, but Naomi answered each one honestly, and Ethan backed her up without overshadowing her. Finally, Harper stepped forward. "That's all the time we have. Thank you." The reporters dispersed slowly, some still snapping photos. When the bakery finally cleared, Naomi sagged against the counter. "You were amazing," Ethan said. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." Harper laughed. "That's adrenaline." "You'll be fine." Naomi's phone buzzed. She checked it reluctantly, expecting more harassment. Instead, it was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Saw the press conference. You did good, girl. Proud of you." Another came through, then another. Messages of support from customers, from people in the community, from strangers who'd watched the live stream Harper had set up. Her eyes filled with tears. "Hey," Ethan said softly, pulling her into his arms. "You okay?" "Yeah." She buried her face in his chest. "I think I am." That evening, after the boys were in bed, Naomi and Ethan sat on her small balcony. The Charleston night was warm, the air thick with the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. String lights Harper had helped her hang last summer cast a soft glow. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said. Naomi looked at him, nervous. "Okay. I met with a lawyer yesterday. About custody." Her stomach clenched. "Ethan, not to fight you," he said quickly. "To make things official, legal. I want my name on their birth certificates. I want to establish paternity formally so there's no question, and I want to set up child support, retroactive, for the years I missed. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do. They're my sons, Naomi. I should have been supporting them all along." He took her hand. "And I want to set up college funds, trust funds. Make sure they're taken care of if anything ever happens to me." She was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. That's a lot. They deserve it. You deserve it." He squeezed her hand. "I know money doesn't make up for lost time, but it's something I can do, something concrete." She nodded, unable to speak. "There's something else," he said. "What?" "I've been thinking about moving. My apartment downtown. It's nice, but it's not a home. Not for kids. I was thinking about finding a house, somewhere with a yard, close to the bakery." He paused. "And I was hoping, maybe eventually, you and the boys might consider moving in. Not now," he added quickly. "I know we're not there yet, but someday, if you wanted to." Naomi looked out at the city lights, thinking about her tiny apartment, the boys sharing a bedroom, the way they had to play quiet games because the neighbors downstairs complained about noise. "That sounds nice," she said quietly. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She turned to face him. But Ethan, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I'm a mother now. That comes first. Always. I know. And I can't just be the woman you remember from the kitchen. I've changed. I'm harder in some ways. More careful. And I need you to be okay with that. I am. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I'm not asking you to be who you were. I'm asking you to let me know who you are now. She smiled through her tears. I think I can do that. They sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city a soft backdrop. Then Naomi said, I love you. Ethan's breath caught. What? I love you, she repeated, stronger this time. I probably never stopped, but I'm saying it now so you know, so there's no question. He pulled her close and she felt his heart racing against hers. I love you too, he whispered into her hair. So much it scares me. Good. We can be scared together. He laughed, the sound warm and relieved. Then he kissed her, soft and slow and full of promise. 2 months later, the bakery was busier than ever. The press conference had worked. Instead of destroying Naomi's reputation, it had humanized her. People respected the way she'd faced the scrutiny head-on. Orders increased. A food blogger featured them on her site. A wedding planner added them to her preferred vendor list. Harper suggested expanding to a second location in North Charleston. Naomi was hesitant at first, but Ethan helped her run the numbers and the math made sense. They were making it work. Mrs. Caldwell had become a regular fixture too. Every Tuesday afternoon, she'd come by the bakery and take the twins for ice cream. She was careful, respectful, never overstepping. And slowly, so slowly, Naomi's anger toward her softened into something like understanding. She's trying, Harper observed one afternoon, watching through the window as Mrs. Caldwell held both boys' hands on the sidewalk. She is, Naomi agreed. You think you'll ever really forgive her? Naomi considered that. I think I already have, mostly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. No, Harper said. It doesn't. That evening, Ethan picked Naomi up after closing. They'd started a tradition. Every Friday night, they'd have dinner together, sometimes with the boys, sometimes just the two of them. Tonight was a just them night. Harper was babysitting. Ethan drove them to the waterfront, to a small restaurant with outdoor seating and a view of the harbor. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air smelled like salt and possibility. They ordered wine and shared a plate of oysters, talking about everything and nothing. The bakery's new location, a building Ethan was designing for the hospital. The funny thing Miles had said that morning, it was easy, comfortable, right. As they waited for their entrees, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. I have something for you, he said. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Another surprise? Kind of. He pulled the velvet box from his pocket, his grandmother's ring, the one Lydia had returned months ago. I know we said we're taking things slow, and we are, but I wanted you to have this. Not as an engagement ring, he added quickly. Not yet, just as a promise. That I'm all in, that I'm not going anywhere. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. Ethan, you don't have to wear it if you don't want to. I just wanted you to know. She took the box from his hands and opened it. The ring sparkled in the candlelight, beautiful and timeless. Help me put it on, she asked. His hands shook slightly as he slid the ring onto her right hand, not her left, because they weren't there yet, but close enough to feel significant. It's perfect, she whispered. You're perfect, she laughed. I'm really not. To me, you are. They finished dinner in a happy daze, hands intertwined across the table. When they left the restaurant, Ethan drove her home the long way, through the historic district, past Rainbow Row and the Battery. Charleston at night was magical. Gas lamps glowing, horse-drawn carriages clopping along the cobblestones, the old city wrapped in stories and secrets. I'm glad I came back, Naomi said quietly. Even though it was an accident, even though everything was messy, I'm glad. Me too. When they reached her building, Ethan walked her upstairs. Harper had fallen asleep on the couch, the twins tucked into their beds. Naomi paid her, and Harper left with a knowing smile. Stay, Naomi said to Ethan as he moved toward the door. He turned. You sure? I'm sure. He stayed. They talked until midnight, curled up on the couch, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, the future they were building. And when they finally fell asleep, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday morning, Naomi stood in the backyard of a charming house in a quiet Charleston neighborhood. It had a porch swing, a magnolia tree, 3 bedrooms and a yard big enough for the boys to run wild in. Ethan had bought it a month ago, and they'd been slowly moving in together, first just weekends, then a few nights a week, until finally Naomi had given notice on her apartment. Today was moving day. The twins ran circles around the yard, shrieking with joy. Harper directed the movers with military precision. Mrs. Caldwell arrived with sandwiches and sweet tea. Even Ethan's father showed up, quieter than his wife but kind, offering to help assemble furniture. It was chaotic and loud and perfect. At one point, Naomi stood on the back porch watching it all and felt Ethan's arms wrap around her from behind. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "So happy I don't have words for it." "Good." He kissed her temple. "Because I have something to ask you." She turned in his arms. "What?" He dropped to one knee. Naomi's breath stopped. "I know we said slow," he began, "and we've been taking our time. But Naomi, I've known for 3 years that you're the one. I just had to wait for you to know it too." He pulled out a ring, a different one this time, simple and perfect, with a single diamond that caught the sunlight. "Will you marry me?" From across the yard, the twins started screaming, "Say yes, Mama, say yes!" Harper was filming on her phone, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Caldwell had her hand pressed to her mouth, and Naomi felt her heart overflow. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes!" Ethan slid the ring onto her finger and stood, sweeping her into his arms. The twins crashed into them, and suddenly it was a group hug, all 4 of them laughing and crying and holding on tight. "When can we have the wedding?" Micah asked. "Can I be the ring bearer?" Miles added. "Ring bearer," Harper corrected, laughing through her tears. "Yeah, that." Ethan looked at Naomi, his eyes bright. "What do you think?" "I think," she said slowly, "we should have a wedding at the bakery, small, simple. Just family and friends, with the biggest cake we can make." "That sounds perfect." And it was. 3 months later, on a golden October afternoon, Naomi Lewis became Naomi Caldwell. The ceremony was held in the courtyard, where they'd hosted the charity event, the same space that had marked their first step toward healing. White chairs, string lights, flowers from the neighbor's garden. Harper stood as maid of honor. The twins, in matching suits, carried the rings down the aisle with only minor detours. Mrs. Caldwell cried through the entire ceremony. Ethan's father smiled more than Naomi had ever seen, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the whole courtyard erupted in applause. The reception was exactly what Naomi had imagined, tables filled with pastries from the bakery, dancing under the stars, speeches that made everyone laugh and cry. The twins stole cookies and charmed every guest, and no one minded at all. As the evening wound down, Naomi and Ethan snuck away to a quiet corner of the courtyard. She leaned against him, his arm around her waist, and looked up at the stars. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, testing the name. "I'm keeping Lewis professionally," she reminded him. "The bakery's established under that name." "Mrs. Lewis Caldwell," she laughed. "That's a mouthful. I'll make it work." He turned her to face him. "I love you. I love you too." "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance. For letting me be a father to our boys. For building this life with me." His voice caught. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do." She reached up and touched his face. "We both made mistakes. We both lost time, but we found our way back. That's what matters." From inside the courtyard, they heard Micah's voice. "Where's Mama and Daddy?" "Probably kissing," Miles said sagely. Harper's laugh rang out. "Give them a minute, boys." Naomi smiled. "We should get back." "One more minute," Ethan said. He kissed her, slow and sweet, under the Charleston stars. When they finally returned to the party, the twins tackled them immediately, and the celebration continued late into the night. 1 year later, the bakery's second location was thriving. Naomi split her time between both shops, and Ethan had adjusted his work schedule to be home with the boys in the afternoons. They'd found a rhythm, not perfect, but theirs. The house had become a home, toys in every corner, drawings on the refrigerator. A swing set Ethan had built in the backyard. It was messy and loud and full of love. On a Tuesday evening, Naomi stood in the kitchen preparing dinner while the boys did homework at the table. Ethan walked in from work, loosening his tie, and kissed her hello. "How was your day?" he asked. "Good. Busy. We had a rush at lunch, and Harper almost killed a customer who complained about the coffee temperature." Ethan laughed. "Sounds about right." Miles looked up from his coloring. "Daddy, can you help me?" "Sure, buddy." Ethan sat down beside him, examining the worksheet. "Okay, so if you have 3 apples and you eat 1, Naomi watched them, her heart full. This was what she'd dreamed of 3 years ago. A family, a partner, a life built on truth and love. Her phone buzzed. A text from Harper. Just got a call from a wedding planner. Wants to book us for a celebrity wedding next spring. 6-figure contract. You in? Naomi smiled and typed back. We're in. Let's do it. She set the phone down and returned to stirring the pasta sauce. Through the window, she could see the sun setting over Charleston, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Mama, when's dinner? Micah called. 5 minutes, baby. But I'm hungry now. Ethan caught her eye and grinned. She grinned back. This was her life. Not perfect, not easy, but real and beautiful and hers. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. 5 years later, the bakery had 3 locations and a cookbook deal. The twins were 7, thriving in school, and arguing about everything from soccer positions to who got the last cookie. Ethan's architecture firm had grown, but he'd learned to balance work and family, turning down projects that would take him away too much. Mrs. Caldwell hosted Sunday dinners at the estate, where 3 generations gathered around the table, laughing, bickering, loving. And in the quiet moments when the boys were asleep and the house was still, Naomi and Ethan would sit on their porch swing and talk about everything and nothing, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. They'd been through fire and come out stronger. They'd lost years but gained a lifetime, and every morning when Naomi woke up next to the man she loved in the home they'd built together, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances, for forgiveness, for love that endures. Because in the end, that's what mattered most. Not the scandal or the headlines or the mistakes of the past, but the choice they made every single day to show up, to fight for each other, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. Together, always, the end.